The tomb guard stood still, his boots clicking in perfect time with the early sun barely peeking through the fog in Arlington. 21 steps, stop, turn, and repeat. As the crowd watched in silence, his weapons sparkled against the precious marble burial of the unknown soldier. After then, a man in a suit that cost more than most people's homes yelled loudly and poisonously. He stepped over the rope and growled, "You're just a prop," daring the guard to back off. The crowd froze when they felt a storm coming. No one, not even the tourists or the man's shaking assistant, knew that this quiet, stoic tomb guard had been shot at in Syria and had wounds that couldn't be seen. And in just a few seconds, one reckless act might bring down a billionaire's enterprise and reveal a truth about power that money can't buy. Don't forget to subscribe with the notifications bell on before we get on with this great story. Please let us know where you're watching from in the comments section. If you still think that bravery, honor, and sacrifice are vital, please help us remember them. It was a cool fall morning at Arlington National Cemetery, and the leaves glowed in gold and red colors under a weak sun with clouds. The air in Virginia was cool enough to sting the lungs. The cemetery stretched across rolling hills like quiet guards, with rows of white headstones, each with names, dates, and stories of sacrifice. The tomb of the unknown soldier was in the middle of this sacred space. Its marble surface shone with a quiet, steady majesty. A gathering of veterans, families, and guests stood on the stone plaza at a respectable distance. Their footsteps were gentle, and their voices were low. Even while some people had cameras and some had guidebooks, everyone felt the weight of the location, where history was not just remembered but also lived. Ryan Mitchell, the tomb's guard, moved with an almost mechanical accuracy, but also with a deep feeling of grace. He paused for 21 paces, turned quickly, and the sound of his polished boots clicking in the silence. The rifle slid perfectly from shoulder to shoulder. His navy blue uniform was perfect, with every button sparkling and every crease sharp. The tomb guard badge on his chest, a little but proud symbol of his work, shone in the morning light. His face was impenetrable, a mask of discipline fashioned through years of training and a tour in Syria, where he'd earned a silver star for leading his squad through a devastating ambush. His apparent and hidden scars were born with the same stoic resolution as his weapon. Ryan was 6'1" tall and had brown hair cut tight to his head. His green eyes were fixed on an invisible point in the distance. The audience listened in respectful silence as a young boy, maybe 8 years old, pulled on his father's sleeve and said loudly, "Dad, why does he walk like that? He gets tired, doesn't he?" The father, who was wearing a flannel jacket and had broad shoulders, crouched next to his son and spoke softly but warmly. "Tommy, it's about respect for the troops who sacrificed everything and never came home. He's making sure we don't forget those guys in the tomb." Nearby, an old man stood with his teenage granddaughter, his worn coat adorned with a World War II regimental pin. Harold Bennett, 78, had witnessed combat in the Pacific, and his weathered face held a mixture of pride and sorrow as he observed Ryan's measured steps. He leaned down to his granddaughter, Emily, and spoke in a rough but steady voice, saying, "This is what duty looks like, Em." Emily nodded, her eyes wide, and she held a miniature American flag that she had purchased at the visitor center. Not many people understand it anymore. The quiet reverence was broken by the low hum of a sleek black Mercedes SUV pulling up near the edge of the plaza. Its polished surface reflected the golden leaves, and its presence felt out of place, like a shout in a library. The driver, a nervous man in a black suit named Davis, scrambled to open the rear door, but Victor Langston was already stepping out, his impatience radiating like heat. Victor, who was 55, was the definition of corporate power. His silver hair was carefully swept back, and he wore a custom charcoal suit that fit his lean frame perfectly. A Rolex Daytona watch with a gold face that caught the sun was on his wrist. His gray eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the scene with a mix of disdain and boredom. "Too slow, Davis," he snapped, brushing past the driver without looking. "We're on a schedule, and I don't have time for dawdling." His executive assistant, Margaret Hayes, a smart woman in her 30s, hurried to keep up with him. Her navy blazer was spotless, and she held her iPad tightly. She tapped the screen and said in a professional but cautious voice, "Sir, the Tech Summit venue meeting is at 2 p.m. in D.C. This could have been done remotely. Don't waste time." "Margaret, I don't trust pictures or virtual tours," Victor said sharply, waving her away. His voice cut through the quiet reverence like a knife, and a few tourists furrowed their brows as he said, "If Langston Innovations is going to host the biggest AI summit this city has ever seen, I need to see the space myself." He pointed dismissively at the cemetery. "But I don't understand why anyone would choose this dusty old graveyard over a modern conference center. Who does he think he is?" a woman in a red coat murmured to her husband. Harold Bennett had heard guys like Victor before, men who thought their money made them untouchable, and his jaw clenched as he put a protecting hand on Emily's shoulder. Margaret followed, her face tense and her heels clicking quieter but still urgently. "Sir," she said in a hushed voice, "this is Arlington National Cemetery." Victor marched toward the tomb, and the sound of his polished shoes clicking on the stone path drew even more attention. "It's more than just a place," Margaret observed. "It's a graveyard." Victor interrupted with a sneer that was loud enough to get people's attention. "It's just a memorial to the past. With AI, quantum computing, and international marketplaces, my company is redefining the future." He waved at the tomb and said, "That's real power. This is a tourist trap, plain and simple." The crowd's mumbling, which was a mix of anger and discomfort, grew louder. A man next to his wife, who was wearing a veteran's cap, murmured, "Typical DC hotshot." "Some people think that money can buy respect," Harold continued, leaning closer to Emily as a young couple with a stroller walked away. The mother whispered, "This guy's trouble. They're wrong." Victor stopped just beyond the velvet line that separated the crowd from the tomb plaza, not knowing how anxious everyone was getting. He narrowed his eyes as he watched Ryan march forward with uncompromising accuracy. Victor said, "Look at this guy," in a volume that could be heard all around the plaza. He called him a living statue. "What's the purpose here?" Margaret remarked. "The tomb guards are elite soldiers, sir." She shifted around and tightened her grip on her iPad. Victor interrupted, laughing in a way that broke up what Margaret had said. "My engineers write the algorithms that run the world while this guy plays dress-up for selfies." He pulled out his phone and snapped a short picture of Ryan. "I'll use this in my speech, progress versus tradition." As Harold's wrists got tighter behind his back and his face got darker, Emily asked, "Grandpa, why is he being so rude?" In a calm, low voice, Harold replied, "He has money, Em, but no class. Men like him can't understand sacrifice." As the tension at the party grew, a father informed his daughter, "That man shouldn't be talking like that here." Victor leaned forward and raised his voice, saying, "You know, Margaret, we'd automate this job in Silicon Valley." People who knew the tomb guards could see the subtle tension in Ryan's posture. He was coiled up like a soldier who had faced worse than a loudmouth CEO in the Syrian deserts. His time there had taught him to stay calm under fire and hold the line when things got crazy. The man checked his watch, a deliberate move to show how important he was. Time, money, and minds worth more than anybody else in this throng. Ryan's face stayed blank, and his eyes stayed fixated on the front. Victor was more sure of himself when he didn't get an answer, and his tone turned sarcastic. "Hey, army boy, how much does this job pay?" Margaret held on to her iPad more tightly, and her professional mask fell off. "Sir, maybe we shouldn't do this now," she said. Victor exclaimed, still looking at Ryan, "I'm curious. I bet my driver makes more than you, and he doesn't have to stand like a mannequin." Davis, the driver, winced and turned his head away, clearly ashamed. Is it discipline that will make this guy act, or is he just being stubborn? As the fight went on, the crowd's whispers got quieter. A tiny boy holding his mother's hand asked, "Mommy, is that man allowed to yell like that?" Harold came forward, his ancient hands tightly clasped behind his back. Emily stayed near, her small flag quivering in her hold. His mother shushed him, her eyes wide with fear. Victor felt more sure of himself in the silence, so he spoke up even more. "You know who I am, Victor Langston, CEO of Langston Innovations. The market capitalization of my company is bigger than that of half of the NATO nations. I've had dinner with presidents and made deals that keep this economy going. What about you? You're just a prop in a history lesson." He waited for a response that never came. Ryan's silence was like a wall, and his steps kept going. 21. Pause, turn, shift. Victor's smile grew tighter, and a flush crept into his cheeks. Victor wasn't used to being ignored. In his world, people jumped when he spoke, bowed to his wealth, and feared his power. His voice dropped, but the edge was sharper. He remarked in a condescending tone, "Let's try this. I'll give $1 million to any veterans charity you choose if you say, 'Good afternoon, Mr. Langston,' right now." The crowd gasped, and Tommy, the young boy, grasped his father's knee and muttered, "That's not fair, Dad." The dad nodded and clenched his jaw. "It's not about fairness, son," he added in a low voice. "It's about respect." Harold's voice was low and his eyes were stern as he whispered to Emily, "This man is about to learn the hard way." Ryan didn't flinch. He kept walking steadily, holding his gun at the right angle, and his discipline was a tacit rebuke to Victor's hubris. Victor's anger boiled over, and his face turned red. He stepped over the velvet rope, which was against Arlington's rules, and into the area around the tomb that was off limits. He screamed, "You hear me? I'm giving you $1 million," and his voice echoed off the marble. "Give me credit." "Sir, you can't do this," Margaret responded quickly, grabbing his arm. "You aren't allowed." Victor pushed her away and walked toward Ryan, his polished sneakers scuffing the holy stone. As the crowd held its breath and lowered their phones, they felt the situation getting out of hand. Harold stepped forward, and his granddaughter grabbed his arm. "Grandpa, no, don't." But Harold's eyes were on Ryan, a subtle show of support from one soldier to another. Ryan halted in the middle of his step, which was against the rules, and shocked the crowd. He turned to face Victor straight, and his sunglasses reflected the CEO's angry red face. "Sir, this tomb honors those who gave their lives for this country. You are in hallowed territory," he said in a deep, steady voice that carried the weight of leadership honed in battle. The crowd stopped moving, shocked by the rare sound of a tomb guard speaking. The words hit like a thunderclap, and their cold authority cut through the tension like a knife. "Step back and show respect." A woman in the back dried her eyes and murmured to her friend, "He's right. This isn't a stage." Victor stopped moving for a second, and his confidence wavered. His lips opened, but no words came out. Then his ego came back, and his face twisted with wrath. "Respect. I pay for this country," he yelled, his voice rising to a fury. "My taxes pay for your little parade. You don't tell me what to do." His palm came out and hit Ryan's cheek hard. The sound of the slap rang across the plaza like a gunshot, and a red mark appeared on Ryan's pale skin right away. Victor's fingers were very clear on Ryan's face. People gasped. The young boy, Tommy, was afraid, and buried his face in his father's jacket. His mother covered her mouth, and her eyes were wide with astonishment. A veteran in a wheelchair clenched his fists and said, "That's too far." Harold hurried forward, and his elderly body moved surprisingly quickly. But Emily grabbed his arm and begged, "Grandpa, please." The audience's